Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to do one that's been on a customer request list for some time now, but I just haven't had one come into my shop. But I did over the weekend. So we're going to show you the Penn Peerless 9. It's the small chassis, light to medium duty reel, perfect for lakes, inshore ocean, bays and inlets, boat fishing. Nice reel overall. This one is working fine. There's no repair needed, but I'll show you how to take this apart, clean it up, lubricate it, and get it ready for the next season. So many of you know that most of the reels that I show on the channel here are either customer reels that come into my shop or reels that I acquire either through tag sales, flea markets, folks closing out, coming to me and they're no longer fishing and just want to find a good place to recycle them and so on. So I don't always have the reels that people are asking about in terms of, is it possible for you to do a breakdown and lube on a particular reel. But I do keep a list, and as I see those reels come into my shop, I make sure that I put these on video for you, so that if you have one, it'll show you how to maintain one. So in this case, it's the Peerless 9. It's a level wind feature, heavy duty in construction, been around quite some time, and a nice go-to reel again for the lakes and inshore ocean. So I start by removing the side plate, and these reels have counterparts. There's the Penn 160 is the short frame Beachmaster series. Many of them share the same components. In this case, this is a level wind, so it has the line guide and worm gear in addition to the regular setup. So we're just going to pull all of these screws out of the side plates here. And if you notice a couple of things while I struggle with the screws, the first one is that I use the parts bucket there to maintain these. That way when I go to reassemble, I know where those screws are, or side plates or gears or anything else that I put in there, like the handles. And also that I wear a protective glove on my non-working hand. That's just to keep the contaminants and grease and the like off of there. So I was just saying about the parts bucket, and you notice that I've just put some screws down on my workbench here. That's to let you know that the screws are different. There's a longer screw which belongs in the side posts, and there's a shorter screw which belongs in the reel seat, this being the reel seat. Okay, so we've just taken this apart. You'll notice a couple of things. On the back side of this, we have the mechanism that turns the level wind gear. This is a bearing. This is your clicker with your click tab. This is the plastic gear that engages the back end of the spool, which has a secondary gear on that drives that plastic. And then there's another gearing here underneath the side plate that locks in the worm and turns the worm gear as well. You want to make sure that all of these have all of the teeth, that they're not chipped, broken, or cracked, and that they're turning freely. And by turning the plastic gear here, you can see that the internal gear, the metal gear, is turning. And I'm just checking to make sure that there's no chipped teeth. Most of the time that a level wind gear does not work or operate properly is because one of these teeth on the plastic gear or more have been chipped, cracked, or broken. And that happens a lot when somebody gets hung up in the rocks, jigging, whatever, and they put too much force on the reel, and you're really grinding this gear against the plastic ones and they break off. So spool's in good condition. All the teeth on that gear are in good condition. I'm just going to start by lubricating this, but before I do, I just want to run some little light steel wool over. There is a little bit of corrosion going on here, so a little steel wool will help clean that off. Get that ready. You could also use a little bit of metal polish. I like a Total Wax Chrome Polish, which is a automotive product, but there's plenty of metal polishes out there if you like, and that'll help shine it up as well. So I have that. I'm just going to put a little bit of blue grease on there now. We'll put a little bit to lubricate the bearing, a little bit to lubricate the teeth on the plastic wheel. Now, some folks have actually asked me, why do they put plastic wheels in there? Why don't they just put metal in there? Of course, I'm not a design engineer, but my guess is that the plastic gear has a little bit more give and flexibility, and can be more forgiving when it comes to the actual tensions that are put on that. The downside of that is it tends to crack under extreme pressures. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to just grab this now and just put a little bit more of that blue grease onto the spool side of this. I'm going to put that spool right back in. Turn the spool, just make sure that that wheel inside is turning. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on, a little bit of oil onto that metal gear inside there. And we're just going to set this aside and go to the business end of the reel. The grease that I use is a Penn Precision Reel Grease. It's a blue grease designed for fishing reels, and it's not the only one out there. There's plenty of fishing reel greases on the market. I would just tell you, when you go to lubricate your reel, please use a fishing reel grease when it's designed for that. Don't use the automotive greases or general purpose greases. I had somebody tell me I could save a few dollars by using Vaseline, which is a petroleum jelly. I guess you probably could, but I would say you're probably exposing the reel to some additional problems there, because it's a lighter based grease, and over time you'll probably wind up rebuilding the reel more than you would like. Now, in order to get this bridge plate off, you have to take the side plate off, this little metal trim ring. I just generally do that by placing a screwdriver underneath and prying it up gently. The reason you do that is this side plate blocks this gear below from coming out, so that's why that has to be removed. I notice there's a little sand in that on the side where the worm gear is going to turn, so I'm just going to grab a cotton swab, just clean that channel out there, just so that we don't have any buildup there that interferes with this as we go to reset all of this. Okay, this reel is very clean. I have some drags over here if we need to replace them, but this one looks very clean, so we might just get away with lubricating those drags. And again, we're going to take the side plate off now, the bridge assembly. You do that by removing the 4 screws. You'll notice that I have my hand cupped around this reel. There's a spring underneath that I don't want to shoot out when I release the bridge. It's for the anti-reverse dog. So I hold the reel like this so that when I gently push through, the spring doesn't shoot. If it does, it's usually pretty difficult to find it, and you usually have to wind up going to get that replaced. Also, you want to notice that there's 2 different types of screws here. The screws on the bottom of this assembly are fully threaded screws. That's the one I'm working on right now. And the screws up top are partially threaded. That's because the springs for the yoke ride on these ones that are partially threaded so that they don't snag. Again, if you're not familiar with the reel, take pictures along the way. Make sure that you understand the sequence of the assembly, so that when you go to return the assembly, you can do it in the right sequence. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pull this line guide screw out. That's just as a precaution for reassembly. And I'll show you why I do that now, but I'm going to take it off while I have it in my hand. We'll push the bridge through, and then we should be able to grab the spring out of that assembly. We're not quite through yet. Okay, we have that. And this one has a flat spring, so we'll show you how to set the flat spring when we go to reinstall. That didn't shoot out because the screw didn't come through. There's the screw. Now we can place it here, and you'll see that there's a flat spring here on the anti-reverse dog. It's just a flat piece of metal. It's an older technology that just seems to work, and that's your anti-reverse dog. So I'm going to put both of those into my parts basket. We'll come up top and we'll release the yoke wants to come out. It's the yoke and spool gear, and then we'll just raise that up so that we can pull the jack off take the springs out and just do a general cleaning. So we have the 2 springs for the yoke. Here's the yoke and spool gear, the jack. This is your main gear assembly over here. So let's work on this first. You can tell, or maybe you can, that there's a lot of grease in that channel. So I'm going back to my cotton swab. That should be good enough to clean most of that grease out of there. And again, that's why I wear the protective hand coating where I can. I can't manage to work with my working hand and have the glove on for some reason. I just don't work well with it. If you can do that, I would recommend a glove on both hands. Okay, so we got a clean channel now. So we can just go ahead and reset this. We're going to do that by grabbing those 2 springs, putting those in the little indentations where the springs ride. I'm going to put a little bit of grease onto that gear side bearing back there. Don't over grease them, but just work it enough that the spool will be able to ride easily. We have an accumulation of dirt on the yoke. Again, I'm going to use a steel wool just to wipe that clean. If there was some pitting, you'd want to get a little bit more aggressive, but you want to make sure that that's nice and smooth so that your spool gear can ride on that. We're looking at the spool gear now. We're checking the teeth just to make sure they're not bent or broken. It'd be a heck of a thing to go through the whole effort only to find that the tooth is broken and that you have to go back and take the reel apart anyway. Okay, light grease on the yoke then, just to replace the stuff that we pulled off. Now the yoke holds the spool gear. The spool gear has 2 sides. It has a flat side and has a side with a slot. The slot always faces out to accept the spool. I'm going to put one more little bit of grease on, and that's going to be onto the eccentric for the free spool release. Grab the yoke assembly, place that over the 2 springs, push down, get the jack, set the jack in place. And then that's returned to the way it came off the reel. All right, I'm going to just set that aside and come over to check out the drags here, see if they need to be replaced or not. This is the main gear assembly. We're going to take the pinion off here just to make sure it's properly lubricated. This one's in fine shape, but I'll just show you how that works. There's a little centering pin that holds it on. Generally, you need a little punch. In this case, I have a pin from an old hand tool that broke. It works fine. And you just need to make sure that you can push it through. So the pin has to be smaller than the hole. You can see the pin coming through on the other side. And then take a little pliers to grab that and pull it out the rest of the way. Just going to lay that right on there for now, and then we can generally pull that off. In this case, we have a nice shaft that's clean, so there's no big problem there. I'm just going to take that steel wool while I have a chance. I'm going to put a little bit of blue grease inside on the post, and then we're just going to reinsert it back. We're going to grab that pin, which was right there. Now, normally I would have put that in a parts bucket, but I knew I was coming right back to it, so that's why it stayed there. I'm just going to tap that back in with a non-marring hammer. And you want to make sure you get that in all the way, otherwise when you go to put the main gear on, it's going to hang up. And I'm just feeling it with my finger. That should be fine now. Okay, so then we're going to put the backing washer on it. And these are new drags, so somebody's already been in there and replace them at some point. These are the HT100 drags. This is not what the reel came with. So they've been replaced, which is great. And I didn't get that stud all the way down anyway. And you can feel it. You don't want to force anything. but you can feel it as soon as you go to put this on. If it's snagging, it's because of that. Now it goes in easily enough. The HT100 drags, I like to put drag grease on. I use a Cal's Universal drag grease for that. And the purpose of this drag grease really is just to keep the drag washers flexible. It doesn't really add that much in terms of max drags per crank or anything like that. It's just a matter to keep those washers nice and flexible so that they don't dry out and that they operate properly. You'll notice I put a little dab on there, and then I run the washer between it to spread it around evenly. The drag washers are both round and keyed. Here's the two. This one has a key to it. This one does not. The keyed always belongs in the middle. Remember, I put one of those metal washers on already. And there's two indentations on the main gear that accept the keyed ears. And you can see it a little bit better once it's set here. They sit inside those two ridges. If you don't put that in properly, your drag stack won't work. Alright, so we'll just put the last one on. Finish that up, and we're basically ready for reassembly now. This is the collar washer that goes on top. And set the tools aside for a moment. I'll show you how to reassemble the wheel, including that flat drag washer. Okay, so we did the back end of this. So we're ready to put the gear side back together. In order to do that, we grab the bridge. We push down on the spool bearing and we insert the bridge, and we turn the gear, the bridge side plate, approximately halfway. We're going to go for the threaded screw. Remember, there's the two different screws. This is the threaded screw. I'm going to grab the reverse dog. The flat side goes up. There's two sides. One has a little round to accept the screw. You'll notice it's maybe hard to see. There's a metal post here. So that flat washer, the flat spring that we have, is going to sit on top of this gear and ride up and rest in this channel. So it's going to make an L shape like that. So this is the flat spring. And this one just requires a little bit of patience. You want to hook it around that metal post first. Sometimes fingers might just be a little bit too big for that. You'll just play around with it, but it will come over and cooperate. Just have to have a little bit of patience. I think somebody actually asked this on my channel before, can these springs be reset? And the answer is yes. And this is where maybe those gloves kind of get in the way, because you lose a little bit of the feeling there as you go to do this. And working kind of the way I'm doing it right now, trying to show this on the camera is probably not ideal. But we'll get there. Okay, so that's the way that it sits. It's laying on top of the dog here, wrapped around the post. It's sitting on the side plate rest. Once you do that, you complete the rotation of the bridge. And then just one or two turns. Don't turn that screw all the way down until you have the others set. And I like to do this in an X pattern. So I go with the one on the bottom that we just set, and then I go opposite up top to seat that. And you have to work that through that spring. Remember, that's why these don't have threads the whole way. Come over to the other side, put the top third screw in there. Grab that threaded one and put it down below. And then once you have all four of them set, then you can go about tightening them down. And again, I like to do it in, oops, that one's not set. I like to do this in a reverse X pattern, kind of an order. And this is why you don't tighten them all down to begin with, because there is some play in that bridge, and the tolerances, You need to have it just right. Okay, so that one's tight. We can go down below again, come up, complete the X pattern. That keeps the torsion even on this and makes it easier to work it. Then we'll give it a trial here. It's doing well, and it's got the anti-reverse functioning. I'm going to go grab that metal side plate here, put that back on. And again, this is why you had to take the side plate off, because that gear sits below the side plate. Come back on this side and we'll put the ferrule in. Now normally if I hadn't taken the gear sleeve off to show you how that works, I would have come back and put oil in there, but because I showed you that and lubricated it, we were okay. Alright, so this is the part that everybody gets squeamish about, including myself, lining up that worm gear on reassembly. So once you have the side plate back on, you can go ahead and I want to put a little bit of lubrication on the spool while I'm at it. Just a little bit on the shaft there, a little more blue grease. I grab that and assemble. I'm going to line these up. And I like to start the screw on the top, but that's it, just start it. You can't drive these home because you have that level wind assembly that's got a seat with the teeth. So just 1 or 2 turns just to kind of hold it. Put a little bit of pressure on the side plate. And everybody's kind of got a little bit of a different way to do this. This is the way I like to do it. Now we got the shield for the worm. And the worm shield runs front and back. The larger piece being towards the back. And you seat these into the holes. You'll notice I did not insert the worm gear. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit more of the slack out of that post with the screw. And then we can go down. I have the smaller screw now, which belongs in the reel seat. This is the shorter one. And just like I was doing on the other piece, I like to go kind of northeast southwest here so that I keep proper tension on this, and then we can come back out and put these other 2 in. Again, the longer screws belong on the side posts and the shorter screws belong in the reel seat. So northeast southwest kind of a thing. This is the side post. We'll put that here. And we'll come down and do the last one, which is the reel seat screw. Alright, so then we want to put that worm assembly back in. And I like to move the worm assembly all the way over to the right hand side when I do this. There is a there's a square shoulder. Just trying to find out which is which. That rides, here it is. This is the squared shoulder. This rides in the side opposite the gear assembly. And this is how you do it. You insert through that hole, which is why I took that out. Seat the line guide into the cross post, and then you can push back and seat that. And then you can just turn the reel. I want to keep the pressure on, but turn the reel. Well, we don't have the drag in there. And then you can seat the side plate screw for the line guide. Now this one you got to watch, because sometimes that worm isn't exactly centered and you have to play around with it, which is kind of what's happening here. So you just have to kind of tighten, loosen, tighten, loosen. It's like the pawl that's on the other side of the line guide. Okay, we're good there. So that's how you do it. You complete the assembly of the whole reel before you put that line guide in. Now we'll put the ferrule on, put some pressure on it, and we'll check the line guide to make sure that's working properly. Got a little crud on that, so let's make it pretty while we're at it. Steel wool again. And just be careful when you go to reset the star drag nut. You have to have it right. It's a soft metal. If you don't quite get it right, you're going to wind up with a cross-stripped screw, and then it's no good for anybody. I'll just give it a test, and as we can see, we're just running beautifully with that. So we've lubricated the drags. I'm going to put a little bit of lube onto the worm gear and a little bit onto the pawl assembly there. And this one's going to be a beautiful reel for somebody to use next season, ready to go. Again, a little bit of junk on the handle, so we might as well just kind of clean that off while we're at it. Clean off the back side as well. Grab the handle nut, and we can complete the assembly. So this is a nice reel. You can tell by the quality of parts inside of it, the strength of the drags, the HT100 drags that are in this one. The gearing is pretty much identical to the Beachmaster series, so it's really kind of over-constructed for the average reel of this size, which is one of the reasons why it's so popular. And for those folks that fish and prefer the level wind feature, it's got the level wind feature as well. So it's a nice reel if you find one that's used. You just found out how to go service it and to make it last a long time. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video in terms of how this reel works. We'll check the drags, make sure that they're nice and tight. Oh, they are. They're ready to go. Check the free spool. Nice, ready to go as well. So that's how you do a Penn 9, and this one will be around for a long time, and I'm sure that there's many seasons of fishing left in that. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it on YouTube. If you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel as I post frequently.